Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, and apologies yet again, this is a bit later than usual. I know we are 3-4 days late this week, but we are, first of all, never going to miss our 100 and something week streak now, so that's gonna continue. And we thought we'd just wait a little bit longer just to review the Indy 500 Open test, obviously 2 days of testing that have happened at Indianapolis, to give you a more complete and fulfilling episode rather than rush something in, which would be as good. And hopefully we should have something cool on the way next week as well, but we'll talk about that later. But as the focus for this episode is recapping the 2 days of testing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which is sort of a first opportunity for drivers to get a feel for their cars ahead of the 100-night running of the Indianapolis 500, which takes place in 1 month and 1 day as of recording, so not too far away at all. So as we said, a lot of testing that's happened, a lot of laps. We've had slight differences in the schedule to this year, in the fact that we've had a high boost session, which isn't usual for the open test. We also had our rookie orientation practices complete and our refreshers complete. So a lot of boxes being ticked at Indianapolis over the last couple of days as drivers sort of get a feel, as we said, for their cars ahead of next month's race. So a lot to learn, a lot of some very busy days for the teams because they want to get through as much of their programs as they possibly can before official practice starts in mid-May. A real mix of things to go over. I mean, where should we even start? Let's start at, well, I guess ticking the boxes. Good to see rookie orientation done for Jacob Abel, Louis Foster and Robert Schwartzman. So first of all, those 3 drivers they passed their training. We'll hopefully see them in Indianapolis 500 unless one of them fails to qualify.
I always find it a bit of a thankless task, kind of breaking down and unpicking the open test and practice really at IMS as well ahead of the 500. Just because, I mean, you end each day, and we've ended the test with about 15. It feels like different timesheets of combined times across all sessions and individual times and no toe times and toe times, and it's always very hard to kind of read into the actual pecking order. I feel, because times don't really mean that much, because the toe times, those who are atop the overall speed charts with a toe, it probably shows that your car handles well in traffic and that you're confident you've got speed. But actually, it's very hard, even on the no toe times in the high boost session. A lot of drivers just didn't get no toe laps in because there were cars it was kind of a bit of a frenzy trying to get out. But yeah, I think, as you say, boxes ticked. It's kind of just one for the formalities, this test, really. I mean, there were a few talking points. Obviously, this was the first full field running at Indy with the hybrid. But yeah, RP, Louis Foster, I believe, was the first to complete that. Robert Schwartzman followed, and then Jacob Abel completed it in the session that followed, but he completed the 2 phases that he needed to in the ROP session. So yeah, I mean, you always look at the rookies, don't you, as possibilities for bumping. I think Schwartzman was one that I particularly looked at ahead of the season, obviously with Prema never having run an oval race before, him also never having run an oval race. But actually, to be fair to Schwartzman, he was pretty on par and competitive with Ilott, and Prema were not, as some people may have expected, given their lack of oval expertise, at all off the pace, really. They were in the mix, they were competitive. And by in the mix, I don't mean fighting towards the front, but they were, they weren't finishing last. I think Dale Coyne Racing, Jacob Abel, they have a bit of work to do, possibly. But yeah, again, hard to really read into.
Very hard to read into. I think what we do need to discuss, though, is this was obviously the first time at Indianapolis for many with the hybrid installed. They'd obviously done quite a bit of testing towards the end of 2023, but that was only Penske, McLaren, Ganassi, and Andretti really doing that testing. There was a test last year in October, but that was only one entry per team. So again, that's only 11 drivers. Prema weren't there at all. So a lot of people's first experience with the hybrid at Indianapolis, sort of the first really running in a pack as well. Obviously, the hybrid's been a bit of a controversial point this year. We've seen too many failures, and again, there were failures. Jack Harvey had a failure pretty much in this installation lap
straight away on the first day.
Ferrucci had an engine issue. I don't think that was hybrid, though.
No, Ferrucci had an engine failure, had to replace his engine. That was, again, it was a disastrous start to the test because, I mean, it was supposed, for the first time in a few years, it's just the weather's been absolutely bliss. And I know the last couple of years there's kind of been one day which has been quite rain affected, whereas this year it was absolutely perfect. Conditions actually quite similar to the test is a week or so later, I think, this year. So conditions a bit more similar to what they have in May. But yeah, no weather to impact, and then there was still a 2-hour 45-minute delay at the start of testing because of connectivity issues at IMS. So the likes of timing and scoring were down. You couldn't show if there was a caution on track, or spotters couldn't communicate, for instance, so they couldn't run, and it took nearly 3 hours to get that up and running. And then that first session, which was already shortened, was then punctuated by Harvey having a hybrid failure. There was a track inspection, and then immediately after that, Ferrucci's engine died, which he actually interestingly was saying was a blessing in disguise, because it allowed them to make some changes that prevented them from maybe being set back 2 days of testing time, apparently. So he was seeing the positives in that.
That's the first, seeing the positives in an engine failure. Never heard that one before. But anyway, back on the hybrid. First chance really to get proper pack running with the hybrid. As at least at the time of recording, there's not been too many comments about how it might affect overtaking, because overtaking is what I think people are nervous about because of the added weight of it. People have said there's been a slight difference in the balance, and you can feel the added weight. Obviously, they do get the regeneration and the deployable energy. Whether that will make a huge difference or it hasn't really on road and street courses thus far, will it make a difference on ovals? Particularly the Indianapolis Motor Speedway remains to really be seen. So, I mean, from what we saw, I guess, again, it's probably too early to tell what the impact of the hybrid is in the pack. But there hasn't been any overwhelmingly negative comments, which I guess is a good start.
Yeah, I feel like what we have heard from drivers has been quite mixed. I think Castro Neves, put some stats to it and said that, so I think he was harking back to the October test that they had, which was the first hybrid running on the oval at IMS. But he said there's maybe something like a 0.7 mile per hour gain, which is pretty negligible, especially when you consider then the balance changes. I think it's hard to look at timings. I compared, yesterday, the first day of the test. I think last year Newgarden put up something like a 2:28 that was without obviously having the high boost last year. Whereas this year, the fastest time we saw in the non-boost session, I think, was in 2:25s maybe on the first day. So quite a difference there. I don't think you can read like masses into that particularly. But it's just hard to, like, when you have the big traffic and pack running, which no doubt the teams will have obtained some pretty useful data and what have you from that. And yeah, you can't really tell from external watching it, because you've got cars at the front. You saw the likes of the Andretti's in a pack leading the way, working as a team. You had Palou and Dixon at the front of a pack, kind of trading positions, but none of the overtakes you see in the test really are legitimate overtakes. It's more like you see in the race where the lead is just being exchanged because they're saving fuel, and it's pretty easy passes. So you have to look further back in the pack, and it's, again, too early to tell, because you have cars that just drop back intentionally to test out certain things. But I thought it was interesting, actually. Kyle Larson, after the first day, was speaking about, in his classic Kyle Larson IndyCar manner. I don't actually know what I'm feeling, was kind of what he was saying, but he felt like the balance was different. He felt like the hybrid was having a bit of an impact, but
I always feel like Larson doesn't really know what was going on, but it sort of helps him sometimes. It's like something's different, but I don't know if it was the hybrid or something else, but something is different.
I find it amusing. He still kind of mixes up the NASCAR and IndyCar terminology. He will use like tight and loose and understeer and oversteer in the same interviews, and I just think that's really innocent and just quite amusing. I think the drivers they don't really know yet what impact the hybrid has had. I don't think any of them have said like it's completely different. I think there's some of the consensus has been that it's maybe a little bit more difficult to drive. The speeds, with the boost, what was the pole time last year? Was
2:34.1.
So it was in the, I think it did just creep into the 2:34. So you were a mile and an hour and a half maybe off that.
No.
And teams
lap pace, not 4 lap average.
That's true, actually. Yes, that's true. We haven't got the full lap averages. That's true, but also I would caveat that from. I mean, yeah, I think there were individual laps in the 2:35s last year, weren't there?
Yeah, I mean they haven't trimmed obviously, so this isn't really too representative. But
exactly, and this is the April test. They are not wanting to go wrecking race cars, and they're not going all gung ho all out for everything. So again, we've not got the clearest read on that. But yeah, it's kind of still out there really whether the hybrid has had much of an impact or not, and I think it probably will. It'll only come qualifying really we'll be able to tell. And again, how much do they utilize it? How much of a boost does it give? Of what different strategies will be deployed? I think that's probably all something that they are going to keep close to their chest. And again, they probably won't disclose that publicly, but that's all stuff they will have been learning in this high boost session, even if it was only sort of 2.5 hours, which did lead to issues in itself because, as I said, there were a lot of cars that just couldn't get a no-toe read because cars were coming out at different times. Scott McLaughlin quite amusingly was saying one of the new teams, I can only imagine he was talking about Prema, were coming out at some peculiar times in peculiar places and kind of just interfering a bit. And as soon as they get a toe with the boost, it kind of renders the data that they're getting a little bit meaningless. So I think that was a bit frustrating. I can't remember what exactly I think he said it was a crapshoot or something. I think that was maybe the language that he used because it was such a condensed. Basically, Fast Friday can be chaotic, but this was a condensed version of that.
I think it's important we don't have hybrid failures come May because Harvey going out there on his first lap and having a hybrid failure is an absolute disaster. Because I still can't believe we've got this pretty much spec part which has been developed for years and years, and we're still having just random failures, which is incredibly frustrating. It's not one random failure once in a blue moon. It's one random failure every single race weekend, at least, which is really concerning. Because you don't want someone's 500 to be ruined because of a spec part which is continually failing.
Yeah, agree. I'm just reading through some of the quotes, actually. I think one thing that Kirkwood said is that he thinks that teams are probably going to be a bit more tentative, a bit more scared in terms of trimming to the level that they have in the past, which again also probably means we might not see the speeds that, obviously last year they were in the lighter configuration pre-hybrid in anticipation for the hybrid. And there was a lot of talk of, will you get a track record? Obviously McLaughlin was the fastest pole run we've seen. So yeah, I think teams are going to be a bit more tentative, and there's not a lot of time really running with the boost, which is why this is important to at least give them something to ponder over for the next few weeks, I guess, because there's not a lot of time with the boost to really get to grips with what is a very major change.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think day one we'll briefly touch on because this was a big Honda versus Chevrolet battle going on day one because Scott Dixon topped the times at the end of day one's running, but of the top 10, a total of 9 of them were Hondas. The only anomaly was Joseph Newgarden, who was up there in a time, so a bit surprising. I can't remember who it was. You'll tell me. Someone that said Chevrolet was playing games. So
that was Castro Neves.
Neves.
He seemed pretty certain that Chevrolet were sandbagging a little bit because obviously last year this was a properly Chevy dominated May. The Honda teams were not really there. I think Felix Rosenqvist off the top of my head was the fastest Honda in qualifying, maybe qualified 8th.
Yes, because Chevrolet fast 6 and 7th was somebody. But yeah, Rosenqvist was definitely the fastest because there was only him and Kirkland and Sato in the fast 12 for Hondas last year. So Chevrolet second with Newgarden, and then you have to look at Larson 11th as the next car. So yeah, playing some games.
Yeah. Again, it's hard to read loads into it, but when you do start seeing trends, I think is when you maybe start picking some things out. But again, there is that whole unknown of, are they sandbagging? I just look at day 2 as well, and looking at the final practice session. Again, there were, I think, 3 Chevys in the top 10, 3 Chevys in the top 12 even. Ganassi particularly were strong on Thursday. In that final session, you have Pelot, Rosenqvist, obviously for Meyer Shank, who are allied with Ganassi. They were the top 2. You had Castro Neves 6th, Dixon 7th, Simpson 11th, Armstrong 12th. So that was a pretty good run from then. Again, it's in those sessions where you are running in a big pack. it's hard to know how much to read into the tyres, but I think Hinch was making very good points on the broadcast. And I must say, actually, kudos to IndyCar for streaming the test. I thought that was a really good move with Alan Bestwick and James Hinchcliffe in the booth, Georgia Hennebury down in the pits as well. I thought it was pretty good coverage. There seems to be some timing and scoring issues. Again, there seems to be a bit of a theme this season. We didn't see timing and scoring all Wednesday on the screen.
To make clear, it's streamed on YouTube as well, which is great for accessibility reasons, because obviously it can be quite hard to find IndyCar practice at the best of times. So it's good. It's good that it was so accessible and just anybody can see it, which is really good.
Yeah, but the point that Hinch made was basically what you can read a bit into in these sessions where it is a lot of pack running is the cars that are the quickest. As I mentioned earlier on, are the cars that you think, okay, they've got the most confidence. He kept earmarking Alex Palou. I know Palou was kind of, after the session, downplayed it a little bit. He didn't feel like he felt amazing, but I don't think any driver is going to say they felt amazing. I mean, to be fair, Kirkwood, who was third in that last session, did say kind of mid-session in one of the interviews that he felt like he didn't really even have to make changes to his car, which I guess is always encouraging. But come back in 3 weeks or so in May and anything could have changed. That seems to be the way that it goes. Yeah,
absolutely. I think this was obviously a first opportunity we got to see Carl Larson as well, so it's obviously worth giving a touch on him as he reattempts the double for the season. Obviously didn't quite go to plan last year, so we'll hope it goes a bit better this year for him. And one thing that was interesting is he was asked if he's done any preparation for this year, and the answer was pretty much no. I've done absolutely none since I stepped out of the IndyCar on May 26th or whatever it was last year, which I found really interesting. He just hasn't touched any IndyCar apart from, I think, doing his steering wheel molds, because that's changed slightly, which is really interesting, because obviously last year he had the ROP in October, and he did the test at Phoenix, and he's been doing all the sim work. And since this year, no sim work, no testing. It's just he's rocking up Indianapolis.
He's busy. He races a lot. I think he said in the press conference, I don't know whether this was just a misspeak or whether he was just trying to emphasize it. I think he said, "I'm racing 54 weekends a year."
Yeah, he put a really good quote, which Sharon McLaren posted the other day. It was like, if I could teleport to a racetrack, I'd be racing 24/7, which shows you the mentality.
He's a proper racer.
He is, and he'll be off to Talladega this weekend, isn't it? So Indianapolis straight to Talladega is an almighty combination of high-speed ovals in the USA. But yes, he hasn't really done any preparation for this Indianapolis 500. So stepping into the car is his first time since he stepped out of the car last May. So pretty good day one from Larson. Obviously, he still has to learn about the hybrid, unlike everybody else, because he hasn't touched it before. But as we said, it's sort of blissful ignorance sort of comes in handy in times, because he doesn't really seem to know what's going on. I think he said he'd need to check with his teammates to see what they thought about the hybrid and if that's the biggest change. But to be fair, I mean, Nolan Siegel obviously didn't qualify for the race last year, so he's not the biggest person to learn from. And obviously, Lundgaard's switched engine provider since last year, so again, he might not be the best person to ask. Basically, Larson's going to ask Pato O'Ward what he thought of the hybrid change. He also said that hearing the team describe it to me was a bit confusing, but once I got out there and all that, it was okay, which basically sums up Larson. The quote for me is like, doesn't really know what's going on, but once he's in the car, he sort of gets the hang of it, because he's just that good at driving.
I spoke about this a lot last year. He just seems so unfazed and calm and unflappable with it all. I thought interesting that he did actually say after the first day was that for now he's treating it like this is going to be the last one. It doesn't seem like there are any plans beyond this 500. He said at least while he's running still full time in Cup, so he's not ruling out anything in the future. And I mean, he's not ruling out coming back next year, but it seems like it's possibly. I know obviously NASCAR's rules are getting stricter and a bit of pressure there, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a piece on that quote on the DIVEBOMB website if anybody wants to read it. But if you didn't know, what NASCAR did in the off season is they introduced this new rule to do with playoff eligibility. Now, if you don't know what NASCAR playoffs are, it's basically how the champion is decided. It's like their own format of the NFL playoffs, the NBA playoffs. It's the way you decide the champion. And basically, Larson, if you were to miss a race for a non-medical reason, would forfeit all the points he's earned in the regular season and when it comes to the playoffs, which would effectively make winning a championship extremely difficult, if not impossible. So, well, it wouldn't be impossible. It would just be extremely difficult for him to win a championship. And obviously, NASCAR is fundamentally his priority. And this year, whatever happens, he will be in Charlotte to do the Coke 600. what we actually haven't touched on yet is what IndyCar's response to that was, which is a slightly new ruling in regards to an alternate driver. So obviously, the scenario is if Larson had to run off to Charlotte because of weather or whatever reason, where he can't do the 500, IndyCar have adjusted the rules slightly. So last year, if that were to happen, Larson, he wouldn't have a replacement. There'll be 32 cars in the Indianapolis 500. IndyCar have released a replacement driver status update since then, which are as follows. So a replacement driver will only be considered if the primary driver is also participating in another marquee event of the Drivers' Principal Racing Series on Indianapolis 500 race day. An IndyCar-approved veteran replacement driver is eligible for and passes the Indianapolis Motor Speedway refresher program in the entry during the first day of Indianapolis 500 practice. Additional tyres for the refresher program will not be allowed for the Indianapolis 500 entry. The tyre allotment for each entrant is 32 sets for the event. Any tyres used for the refresher program will be taken from the allotted tyres to the entry. During the refresher program, minimal setup changes will be allowed. After the replacement driver completes the required phases of the refresher program, additional laps during the session will not be committed. Once IndyCar is notified that a team will use its replacement driver for the Indianapolis 500, the entry's qualified position is forfeited and the car will start at the rear of the starting lineup.
What I found amusing, sorry to cut over you, Dan, is there was not a single mention of Kyle Larson, but this was so obviously the Kyle Larson rule. And I presume it means Tony Kanaan will have to run a refresher on the first day of practice in May.
I love the first sentence. A replacement driver will only be considered if they're participating in another key event of the Drivers' Principal Racing Series. So unless somebody decided to run over from Monaco, well, you can't do that next year anyway because they're changing the Monaco date, aren't they? So they can't even run over from Monaco. Does Formula E have a run out in somewhere around that date, or MotoGP or something? It's yeah. I think the Larson rule is a good way of putting it because it's worded so specifically. That,
I think colloquially it might be known as the Kyle Larson rule.
Yeah, and as you mentioned you alluded to, basically it's going to be Tony Kanaan, the Aaron McLaren team principal, coming out of retirement. He must be almost 50 now. He might actually be 50, Tony Kanaan, if he actually gets a run on the 500. So we'll probably see him in the first day of practice. He is 50 years old. He turns 51 this year. So. When's the last time? Oh no, Helio might be 50 now, mightn't he? Anyway, I was about to say it was the last time we saw a 50-year-old at the 500, but Helio might be 50.
Sato is 48, I believe.
So come race day, Helio will be 50.
Wow.
So, well, so we haven't seen one in ages, but we will get one this year. But anyway, that's a different topic. Kanaan, we'll probably see him in the first day of practice because they say it's an IndyCar-approved veteran driver. Because I guess theoretically you could have the person who doesn't qualify for the race in that car, but IndyCar said they've got to be an IndyCar approved veteran driver. I guess if like Rahal or someone who doesn't qualify again, you can chuck him in, and I guess that'd be an IndyCar. But, well, to be fair, it says they've got to pass it during the first day of practice, so maybe not. Maybe I'm reading too much into this.
I don't know. Yeah, we are reading way too much into this, but I would assume he would be eligible given that he's like he hasn't even needed to refresh him because he's already past that point. Yeah, I don't know. We don't need to think about that.
If Kyle Larson can't do Indianapolis 500, in likelihood, IndyCar have allowed it where Tony Kanaan will be able to replace him, which is good because we don't want 32 cars at the 500. Anyway, what are we on about? You on about Larson not being able to do the 500 after next year? Obviously, it was controversial last year. They eventually handed him a waiver. Some people didn't like it. Some people did, thankfully. But yeah, he says once he's not full-time Cup, he can devote all his mind to Indy, and he'd like to do it again. He also says, if I happen to win the Indy 500, I'll probably ride off into the sunset too, which is quite interesting. But he says he hasn't sat down with anybody about it. There's been no discussions. It always seems sort of clear when the announcement was first made that the intention was a 2-year program. Beyond that, again, it doesn't seem like he knows. And I'd probably say from what he was saying, it's 40% he will, 60% he won't, heading into 2026. So, yeah, it might be the last time we see Kyle Larson in Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the foreseeable future. I think he also said I'm still young, which I think he's 32, which in motorsport terms isn't really that young nowadays.
He's 18, but he's 18 years off Helio.
He's 18 years off Helio. That's very true. I mean, America, they seem to go for a lot longer than they do in European side racing. Like if you're a 32-year-old in F1, you're coming to your peak of your powers a little bit, and in IndyCar, it's like you still got your prime years left. So. Yeah, he's still young. Right. He's still young. He's still young for people who are in their 30s that you are still young. Anyone listening to the podcast of Carl Larson's age. So, yeah, it would be a bit of a shame. But look, we probably come back to this in June time, but it's one last chance for Larson to really have a proper crack at this. And as a driver who's at the peak of his powers of Hendrick Motorsports and Aaron McLaren to incredibly well-oiled operations and one of the best drivers in the world. So let's see what he can do. He's obviously made mistakes last year when it came to pit road, when it came to the restarts. He's got that experience under his belt. So going to go for it again. Anyway, we were speaking so highly of Carl Larson, which is ironic because he crashed on the second day of running on his first lap on the high boost session.
And he was happy about it. He said in his I don't know whether happy is the right way to put it, but I think it was along the lines of him saying that essentially he was actually quite glad that it happened, and it wasn't anything like different to what he expected. Because there's always that thing, the old saying, isn't there? If there's those who have crashed and those who will crash at Indy, it's kind of an inevitability. So he's got it out of the way. He's not had the full Indy experience if he hasn't had a bit of a shunt.
And I think you'd much rather do it now than getting to May. And there's always the whole thing when you crash in May, whatever car you get into will always be slow. We saw of Ericsson last year. The backup tub was really not good enough. So you'd much rather have that now than have that crash in May. And might dent his confidence a little bit, but hey-ho, picks up from here.
I just think he seems so unflappable that it probably won't. And to be honest, it wasn't too big a crash. I mean, judge like by Indy sort of standards, and given it was with the boost as well. I mean, yeah, he just got too high in turn one, as they say. He pancaked the wall. He basically just slapped the wall pretty square with his right side, and he actually did a really good job, I think, to just slam on the brakes and scrub off enough speed because he was a passenger after that, and there was only quite light contact then with the safety barrier again in turn two. Came to rest, and yeah, it was.
Same tub, kept the same tub. Yeah. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, he obviously kind of climbed out. He was fine. The team, I think, because obviously if they were to get him back out, they maybe could have done. I think if it was May, they may well have done. But I think for the sake of just getting a few laps, they thought it wasn't worth just doing a rush job at getting the car back together because, okay, it's not ideal. Having not been in an IndyCar since last May, having essentially a whole day missed of testing, but there's just so much time still to come in May. I know all the drivers say that there's never enough time, but yeah, there's still plenty of time ahead. It's not panic stations, but at the same time, Larson, after the first day, was not totally comfortable. I think he actually spoke quite highly of the fact that he had to do the refresher session just because it means he can kind of gradually get back into it. But I think he definitely said there was maybe a bit less anxiety and more and less unknowns than there were last year, of course. But he actually, whether it was a hybrid, he doesn't know. We don't know. If he doesn't know, then we definitely don't know. Yeah, he wasn't entirely sure, but he wasn't feeling totally comfortable. And I think he basically said, this was his first lap with the boost, wasn't he? He got one lap in the high boost session, but he said that at those speeds, it felt like the issues that he felt on Wednesday were kind of just magnified and enhanced a little bit. So yeah, there's a bit of comfort to find there. I don't think it was overall really a phenomenal test for Aaron McLaren, to be honest. Siegel and Lundgaard especially didn't really trouble the upper echelons. I know Ward wasn't quite there amongst the very, very top guys consistently, but again, that's just looking at the timesheets, and we know that the timesheets can mean absolutely nothing in these situations.
Yes. So Larson was one of two to crash. I think I said right at the start, Sato was the quickest. He was, but in no toe. McLaughlin was the quickest, but he did have a toe. Sato had a much bigger crash than Larson. Now, this crash wasn't actually ever broadcasted, so we have to sort of guess what happened. He hit the wall somewhere in turn one, and he ended up in the wall somewhere in turn two, with quite a heavy impact and quite a lot of damage from what we could see, which probably will be a new tub for Sato.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, the interesting thing that I thought with that crash, and having not actually seen where evidently the major impact had happened, because he obviously came to rest in turn two, just like Larson, quite deep in turn two, which I guess shows the scale of the crash, because he had a lot of momentum there to basically settle it on the exit of turn two. But he already had all the damage before he only just clipped the wall in turn two. So, I mean, most of the damage, the rear of that car was mangled, but it looked like in terms of, the side pods were properly cracked, but it actually looked like the left side had more damage. So he must have spun in turn one and actually contacted the wall facing backwards, maybe. for the left side to have taken the brunt of the damage. But yeah, that is a big blow because that car was quick. I know Graham Rahal likes to make jokes, and he did last year about, Sato has a hell of an engine, obviously with the Honda links being Japanese, and with conspiracies and all that. We won't get into it, but he was 1.1 miles an hour quicker than the next quickest driver on those no-toe charts from the high boost session, which was Kyle Kirkwood after him. He was the only driver to break into the 232s with a 232.565 quickest average lap speed.
Is 0.3 quicker than his average from last year in the Fast 12, which
is good with the added hybrid rate. But yeah, that looked like, that had him top of the overall speed charts for a while, up against the drivers that had toes, which was super impressive. And I know with the toe, there can be the factor of, okay, maybe there was dirty air, what have you. But yeah, I thought that was pretty impressive. And that actually held up for the second best time of the test, despite being a no-toe up against all of the many toes because of just how chaotic it was trying to log a lap. But yeah, now that car that was showing so much speed, Sato, he actually quite gingerly got himself out the cockpit, but he was seen released, said he had a little bit of pain, a little bit of bruising, but he was okay. But his car's not okay, and he said it was actually quite heartbreaking because I think, as a two-time winner, he knows when he's got a quick car, and this car looked pretty bad fast, didn't it?
Ironic for that team. Very ironic for that team.
Pretty gutting. But yeah, that team, let's just get on to that. Because
we haven't mentioned Graham Rahal's mini crash when he
pancaked
the ball day one.
I was going to segue. I was going to segue to that because Rahal had a pretty good test. Well, Rahal as a team, but Graham Rahal had a pretty good test given where obviously they have been in recent years. They've spoken a lot, and we've spoken a lot about the direction that they went in that was probably wrong, getting a lot of people over from F1. Which was obviously not going to do anything for their oval performance. But yeah, they had a good test. Rahal, pretty much at the very end of the first day of the test. He came very close to the turn 2 wall, like precariously close. It was kind of a question of, has he clipped the wall? And then turn 3, basically with his right wrist, slaps it twice in the same motion, and presumably breaks a toe link, and he's then wiggling through kind of 3 into 4 and does a really good job to save it, because it would have been quite a big crash. And actually fair play to all of the other drivers behind him who did a good job to kind of back off. It was pretty heads up because they could have collected him as well, because he was wobbling, and that it could have been bad. And actually on a similar incident to that, Rinus VeeKay ran out of fuel. Talking Thursday here, kind of back end of the first hour of that final session. I think it was exit of turn 2. He really slowed, and Ward was running right in his wheel tracks and did a really good job to react. Santino Ferrucci then had to react to Ward reacting, had a big wiggle, saved that. Castro Neves ducked down and avoided it as well. But Jacob Abel then later ran out of fuel as well in that session. So I know James Hinchcliffe said that that's pretty unacceptable, and you can't be doing that. Whether there's some miscalculations there. But
fuel gauges, they got some sketchy.
Ooh, you can't be doing that when you're running at 230 odd miles an hour in the corners. That's pretty bad, because that could have been really nasty if O'Ward hadn't reacted, and probably would have just vaulted over VeeKay, and there could have been a few cars involved. So big one avoided from some pretty heads-up driving. But we're back to seeing crashes again. It's unusual. We haven't seen many of them this year, have we? The lack of cautions.
To be fair, we were running for how many hours across 2 days?
It's true. But I know obviously the open test in recent years has kind of been confined to a day. And 23 especially was really clean, because the first crash of the year came on Monday after qualifying, didn't it? Last year, obviously, we had a few in practice. Lundqvist,
Ericsson.
You had Ericsson, you had Siegel as well. And then obviously qualifying as well, Siegel, VeeKay. It was a bit messier last year. But I actually...
We don't even mention race day, where this first half of the race was just been crashing.
Of course, but it feels a while since we've seen incidents in the open test. I actually said to you, Dan, this morning, I was a little bit worried about this high boost session, because, you've had a day of running leading into that, half of which has been kind of the formalities of the veteran session and then the RP refreshers, what have you. And then there's only really been one all-car session, and then you're immediately throwing them right into this high boost. They obviously have never run the boost in hybrid configuration before. they've not really figured out the balance of the cars with the hybrids. So I did worry going into today that it was a bit of a risk because teams had not had the time to even get used to the hybrid without the boost, and then they were chucked into having the boost. It felt like a bit of a risk. I don't know whether that was the reason behind the crashes. It could well have been, because both of them said that they felt things and then they probably could have backed off and what have you. So yeah, I was a tad concerned there. But we've got another tangent. RLL. Louis Foster was fourth in that high boost session, no toe times. Again, it's obviously not totally representative because not many drivers actually managed to get no toe times. Particularly, I think there were 6 that managed to get a time in over 230 miles per hour with a no toe. So can't read a ton into it, but I do think the fact that Foster was fourth, you had Ray Hall top 10 as well in that session, Sato first, and they were not in that bottom gaggle really at any point across the weekend. So
and Foster's time is pretty comparable to what they were doing in qualifying last
exactly,
year.
Exactly. And I don't know exactly how a no toes works out, whether there is a slight, very distant toe if there's another car on track. But usually it's, I think, if there's one other car on track across the other side of the speedway, it tends to not really have an impact. So yeah, that's good. That's good for RLR because they've been searching for 2 years now. They've really just been fighting to get in the field. So
we're gonna look back at his comments on bump day when Ray has been bumped for almost been bumped for the 3rd year in a row.
I like the fact, by the way. Let's have a quick livery talk.
Yes.
Ray Hall's got his like build
workman's outfit.
Hive vest. That's it. His Hive vest is back.
And our favourite one. Well, not our favourite one, but the Dreyer Reinbold cars. Got very distinct looks this year. Now we've worked it out. Jack Harvey's is just Renus VK's car from last year. Ryan Hunter is Renus VK's car from this year.
It took us an alarming amount of time to figure out that Harvey's car looks identical to VK's from last year, just black and kind of light luminous green. And then Hunter Ray and VK. I don't think we are actually going to be able to tell them apart on them because their cars look identical.
Pretty similar too.
I think all the Andretti cars, especially Kirkwood and Ericsson, and this is a full season issue, their cars look really similar as well. And yeah, there's just a lot of kind of blue and reddy, orange, white, similar.
Yes. I mean, we need less blue and white liveries. There's too many of them. Too many of them.
And I mean, there's some testing liveries as well. I know Marcus Armstrong, I think he had an all black livery. Louis Foster had a pretty bare white car. Stingray Rob had a very colourful, bit like Connor Daly's polka dot. Was it like Connor Daly's? Oh no, actually no. The comparison I would give actually is it was a bit like Kiffin Simpson's car, very multicoloured, which isn't very Hunkos. Doesn't. Harvey's is the Hunkos car in the field for Dreyer and Reinbold.
I've got to say, Simpson's livery. I know it's the same one as usual, but that livery is awesome. On track, it looks even better than it did in the renders.
Sensational.
It looks
sensational.
Absolutely awesome. The McLaren ones, I'm not a fan of the white.
They look better. They look better now. I've seen them on track than I thought. I thought they were a bit too white initially, and actually now they're on track. They do look a bit better. Lungard's looks just like Rossi's last year. I think Siegel's is probably the most underwhelming because it kind of, I guess it's quite similar to Larson's in a way with the blue and white. I do quite like O'Ward's actually now that I've seen it on track. The black with the white.
They've done a few cool 500 liveries. The Triple Crown thing was really cool when they did that in 23. I prefer the standard liveries, but each to their own. Yeah. I think it's I need more papaya in there for a team that's there.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just trying to have a look through, see if there's any other names that stand out with interesting liveries. The Ed Carpenter cars are probably going to be quite difficult to pick apart. They all look fairly similar to one.
Well, they do race to race. I mean, I haven't admittedly seen Ed Carpenter, so I don't know.
It's quite similar. It's kind of like a merger of the two. Devlin DiFrancesco, he's kind of in the Robin Simpson category. He's got a very colourful car. Is he in that
slightly bizarre, like, crypto car,
isn't he? Yeah.
Which, again, the last thing we need is more confusing sponsors at IMS. We still haven't worked out Polka Dot. Listeners, you can comment as much as you want about Polka Dot, but we still will not understand what it is. I think we have to officially resign. We are never going to understand what Polka Dot was, what their motives were, what there is, like anything about. I still don't understand it. So
Yeah, the other thing I would say, Abel also had what looked like more of a testing livery.
yes.
So there's a few still to see.
Armstrong's all black livery is very nice. Probably about
I wonder whether he will end up with being in maybe the Root Insurance car again.
Castro Neves is quite nice, actually.
Oh yes, that's the other one as well. But that again is another one that looks quite similar to some others. I think that was getting confused with Hunter Ray and VK a little bit as well. Must talk actually. VK's test was interesting. Obviously, you mentioned the moment that he had, but he basically didn't run on. Getting my days mixed up. He didn't run on Wednesday. I mean, he actually was one of the more productive on Thursday, but I think he was just electrical issues. His radio wasn't working. But obviously at IMS, as much as the car can still run, that's a big thing. Larson also had radio issues limited his running a little bit on Thursday too. On Wednesday. His running on Thursday was limited by his crash. It's late while we're recording this. It's just shy of midnight, and I've still got to write my report for the day as well. Look on the DIVEBOMB site for those if you want roundups of each day. But yeah, Larson also had radio issues, had a bit of an engine gremlin as well on Wednesday. So yeah, going back to him, it wasn't an ideal test really for Larson. But no, I don't know if there's anything else interesting we want to pick out, just to kind of cycle through maybe the top 10 of that no-toe. I think if you're going to look at a timesheet, it's the no-toe runs from the boost session. Again, as I said, it's quite hard because a lot of drivers didn't get a no-toe lap. But Sato, Kirkwood, McLaughlin, Foster, Simpson, Hurta, Newgarden, O'Ward, Power, Ray Hawk. I think those that you expect to be players look like they're going to be players. The top teams, none of them look like they're in crisis. I know I mentioned Aaron McLaren have looked maybe a little bit on the back foot in terms of the timesheets, but Ganassi have looked strong, cutting it up within the packs. Penske too, and Andretti have. A lot of the Andretti cars run together a lot, but
this is the first time in about 18 years that Newgarden's on top of this test.
Good point.
He's topped this test since literally like the dawn of time. So some statistician out there after the final last time Newgarden's not topped the open test.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. That's an interesting anecdote, isn't it? Yeah, we must find because it's been at least 3 or 4 years he's topped this test consecutively. So what's happened to him? He's washed. He's not winning it. He's not going for the 3 in a row. No one's ever done it, if you didn't know. So
just gonna have a look at if there's any other talking points. There weren't really a ton of big talking points. I think the crashes were the big one. There's obviously the hybrid as well. Honda, the Honda Chevrolet battle. Obviously, Honda look on top. But it's hard to say. I think it's hard to come to any conclusions after this test. It always is, and I think it's going to be a bit bizarre now having to switch cadence again. And okay, you've got a weekend off, but then you're going to Barber, and then okay, you're back at Indy, but you've got to be in road course mode, which is always a bit of a weird weekend because everyone's mind's kind of set on the 500, but you've got a road course race, which obviously the guy who can just block out anything, Alex Palou, will probably dominate by about 30 seconds. But yeah, it's just going to be a bizarre few weeks, 3 weeks or so until we're actually back on track again. And I think the fact that the test has fallen later gives even more of that feeling this year. But it's just going to be weird. I can't imagine for the teams having to just change cadence. But also I imagine those next few weeks as well, there's going to be so much focus on further refining the speedway cars that they've put an off-season into refining without actually knowing what they're going to do on track. There was actually something quite interesting. We don't touch a ton on sponsor news, but there was an interesting initiative actually that came out on Wednesday ahead of running an announcement with Verizon, Team Penske, kind of in conjunction with IMS and also the Indianapolis Colts, the NFL team, that Verizon are basically donating $6 million to the Indiana area to take away debt for military veterans and their medical bills, which will essentially pay for all of their medical bills. And I think that's part of, it was $22 million commitment across the wider Great Lakes area, so kind of in the Midwest. As far as that, my US geography isn't phenomenal, but I think that's kind of the Midwest area through to like Green Bay, I think was mentioned. So yeah, $6 million, Penske in conjunction with Verizon going to clear veteran debt in the Indiana area. And Will Power, if he finishes in the top 10, there will be a further $1 million, I think, donated to that as well. So that's a really cool initiative. But we had a press conference about this with Will Power, with Doug Bowles, obviously IndyCar now president, as well as president of IMS, and Andy Brady, who is the president of Verizon Great Lakes market. So my first question to them was more general, just about Verizon and obviously the partnership with Penske, because you see in motorsport very few partnerships like this. Obviously in IndyCar, we're very used to sponsors chopping and changing race to race within teams, even, Penske on the other two cars, for instance. But Verizon has been with Power ever since the start of his Penske career, was obviously formerly a title sponsor of IndyCar as well, but it's coming up to 17 years now they've been with Power and Penske, which is pretty cool. So yeah, just a little bit of insight on what has made that such a long-standing, stable and quite special partnership. And then also one of the favorite answers I think we've got, to be fair, from Will Power, just a couple of minutes from him, on what makes the month of May so special to a guy who obviously has won the race back in 2018. Hi, Dave. First of all, we often see sponsors changing all the time between cars and IndyCar. So maybe for Will and Andy, what do you feel has made Verizon such a stable and special partner over such a long period of time?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible partnership. What has made it? I think the question is what's made it continue. I think it's success. Partnering with Penske, which, when I think about it from a driving perspective, you're given the opportunity week in, week out to have a car that's capable of winning, getting pole positions, winning the Indianapolis 500, winning championships. So I feel like I've been very fortunate to have had Verizon on my car for this long, because it is actually unusual in motorsport. I'm not sure what the longest standing sponsorship partnership has been, but it's been, what are we at, almost 17 years now. So very fortunate, and I hope it continues. It's like I said, I'm very proud to have Verizon on the car, and some of the the stuff they do in the community, like what we're talking about today, is incredible. So I feel lucky and privileged, and I want to pay that back by performing in particular at this race, especially because it means giving another $1 million to the veterans.
I think the thing that makes it special from a venue and series standpoint is it's much more than a sponsorship. It is a partnership, and it truly is working together to solve problems. So the perfect example Andy and I talked about is, how do we make that customer experience better? How do we take what Verizon does every day, 365 days a year for so many people, and the technology they have, and implement it at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and through the NTT IndyCar Series in a way that we're getting better, we're producing a better product for our customer. And so for us, it's a sponsorship, yes, but it's really a partnership where together we're learning, we're testing their new technology, we're allowing our customers to see it, and we're making the entire experience better. So for us, sponsorships come and go, but partnerships stay a lot longer. And I think as you treat this Verizon one more like a partnership than a sponsorship, is part of the reason I think it's just so successful for us.
I think success certainly helps drive an initial sponsorship, but the culture that the Penske family and IMS brings and you bring is the reason why we stayed. It's the people that create it, right? And your success, we want you to be as successful as you possibly can be. We want this track to be as successful as it can be. We want Penske family to be as successful in Penske racing. But the culture from the top is the reason why we work so hard together, and we find solutions. I think that's the key thing. Partners look at opportunities and they fix opportunities. If you're not a partner, you say, here's a problem, and then you blame. I think we find opportunities to work together as organizations, and the culture is really what kind of stands true. You're a great person, and the fact that you're successful in your craft, it's a double whammy. So we're proud to have our name on your car.
Oh, thank you.
And then just obviously today is the start of preparations on track for the 500. So for Will, obviously as a winner of this race, and to someone like me who has not been to IMS, how would you explain just how special the month of May is, and what maybe stands out to you about the 500?
Yeah, it's obviously our Super Bowl, and I think it's the history of this speedway. You know, the legends it's created that have run this race, won this race. There's no feeling that you can't really explain it when you walk out there on race day. You walk out of Gasoline Alley to see that many people in the stands, the sound of it, the feel of it. You always have butterflies, always feel nervous before you get in the car, but it's just, man, you know, I was in the museum yesterday and I went in, I had the, what's the name of the display? Starting line experience. I mean, it gave me goosebumps because you had the flyover, you had the national anthem, you had them singing back home in Indiana. Yeah, it's just, there's no event like it. I think the longer I've done it, the more I've appreciated it. You know, the amount of media attention over the month, how hard it is to get a pole position here. I'm the all-time pole position holder for IndyCar, and I don't have a pole at this place. So, you know, I've been on the front row and I've been on the back row. You know, it's much harder doing the 4 laps to just get in the field than, you know, the 4 laps I did last year to get on the front row. So, gives you a lot of respect for the place. It's very can certainly bite you, but when you win it, the feeling there's no other feeling like it driving into victory lane here with that many people doing the victory lap. An incredible place, incredibly difficult to win. But when you do, it's something you'll never forget.
Right, so I think we'll leave it there for the recap of the 2 days of the Indianapolis 500 Open test in 2025. Again, apologies this episode is slightly late, but we thought we'd let the test finish and give you an episode reviewing the test before we, instead of just getting something out there for the sake of getting something out there. But we will be back. It might be Wednesday next week, so we do apologise, but we're looking at getting somebody on the show, which is what we'll hint to you for next week, which would be pretty cool. So yeah, that'd be cool. So stay tuned. Hopefully it'll happen. There's no promises yet, but that's what we're looking at doing. If not, again, you will have something. And after this, episodes get a lot easier because then you've got Barber, and then it's the GP, then it's qualifying, then it's the 500, then it's Detroit, and then it's a week off. But then you've got Gateway, then it's Road America.
There's going to be very few weeks off. There's going to be very few weeks off from here through basically to the end of August as the season ends. This is the end of the off-seasoning and in-seasoning slight slog.
These weeks are honestly the worst because you get through 6 months of off-seasoning, trying to find something every week, and you do it, and you're wow, we got through that. That was impressive. And then you come to this period, and it's actually even worse for content because you've drained it all in off-season, and you come to this point, and you're like, we've got nothing left. So we carry on marching. We are very close now to 2 years in the podcast. I think just after Barber was our first in 2023.
Yeah,
between Barber and IMS.
Yeah, it was as kind of Indy dawned. Let's put it that way. End of April, early May.
So the first episode released May the 8th, so about 2 weeks' time. So we'll celebrate our birthday a bit closer to the time, but that's coming up. But anyway, for this week, thanks very much for watching, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.